They closed a lot of them, right. And especially, this was kind of like a little hidden thing. If enough of whites didn't want to go to that black school, well, they'd close it. And just, because we know we had no choice, you was going. But they would try to keep certain schools open. Well, Luther Jackson, they kept that one open. They integrated that one. But I think majority of them, now I could be wrong about saying majority, I think they closed it. Because whites refused to go to it, just because it was a black school. Yeah.
So, let's talk about travel. You had talked about you had gone to the lower part of Virginia. Tell us a little bit about what that was like.
Well, one of my favorite people in the world, he just passed a couple years ago. He was my best friend. We kind of grew up together. We married 2 sisters. And he was from Norfolk, Virginia. And he used to always talk about Norfolk. First thing, he had gave me a picture of Norfolk like it was in Florida. City this, city that, they lived in cities with bathrooms and stuff like that. But I'd much rather live in the country. But anyway, we went down there one time, and actually my first trip down there, we went down there to play basketball. We went down there to play a team down there, makeshift team. And so we got down there, we was just riding around, and we went out into, I think it's called Franklin County, I'm not too sure. And we was riding around, no, it was Suffolk. We was riding around, and he said, well, we better get up out of here because it's getting dark. Because I said, what's that got to do with it? He said, this is Klan country. And I'm like, yeah, right. We kind of laughed. I mean, my boys, we kind of laughed, And he said, no, I'm serious. He said, I'm serious. And we looked at him for real. Now, tell you how crazy we were from up here. We was like, well, when they going to come out? I want to see a Klan. And I never seen one but on TV. And so, and on our way home, there come a truckload of them. Pickup truck, dressed in white. And I'm like, we was like, man, slow down. He said, no, man, I'm serious. Let's get out of here. I'll never forget that. Because on one hand, it was funny, but then I would stop and think, they was real Klansmen. Never seen nothing like that up here. Hear talk of it, but never seen anything like that. And now, not to say that it wasn't. And I'm pretty sure it was, but never saw any or heard of any activity, not in this area. But yeah, we was, and then naturally in me, I'm like, well, what do they do? Why do they? And he's, oh man, I mean, you don't, it's Klan country. You go back home, back into Portsmouth. Yeah.
Wow. So what was their purpose? Did he say why they were?
Doing what they do, I guess, harassing blacks and stirring it up, or just their presence, because they was known for that too, just ride around, because it wasn't as easy as, I guess, as jumping on blacks and beating them up and stuff like that. It was a little bit above that, I would say it was the tail end of it now. So the intimidation factor now is just to ride around, and probably use the F word at you or something, or the N word, but ride around, intimidation. Yeah, that's what that was. And those, I would say, those people that were used to that lived down there, they were scared to death. And we was like, bring on the Klans, let's see what they look like, And but they was serious. They was like, let's get out of here.
Yeah.
And
well, we know intimidation was used a lot for voting and suppressing voting. Did you have any problems with that? You, your family, your father, did you guys vote? Or?
No, we didn't. My family wasn't voters. Not to my knowledge, anyhow. We wasn't really church people per se, but my father was probably the most religious person I've ever known, and I'm a church man. Didn't become one until 20 years ago, but in church in our family was, and voting and things like that was, if you want to do it, fine, but we didn't. You going to church today like I did my kids, if you want to go, fine. If not, but my father was a praying man. I remember times when he would come home a little tipsy, But I have never, and I'm serious, never saw my father put a piece of bread in his mouth without blessing it. And I've never seen him go to bed without getting on his knees and praying. And I'm a church person. I've never been on my knees. Well, I have. But I don't holler at anybody get on their knees anymore. But my father got on his knees every night. I don't care what the condition was, how it was, every night. And I've never seen him put a piece of bread in his mouth without blessing it. And all the church folk, my father was the favorite person, more so than the people that went to church, because he was the guy, he was the go-to guy. Back then, we dug our graves by hand. And my father was a grave digger, the community grave digger. Him and made us, volunteered us. But he was and something needed to be done. He was the kindest guy in the world. He was so kind to, like I told you, that we used to like, my Uncle Tom. Anything somebody wanted him to do, he got it, let me do it, or I'll do it, or go get it. But yet, when they pass them on the road, when they're in their little church uniforms, like my mama used to tell them, don't even want to speak to you, till somebody die. And then, but they liked him though. He was a good person. And I remember all the widowers in our neighborhood that their husband died or didn't have one or whatever. My father used to make us cut wood for them, And he used to tell us, well, while we out here, boys, let's cut that tree down for Mrs. Harris. And he was like, Daddy, and Mama was a little bit different. Like I said, Mama was from up south, up north. City woman.
Where was your mother from?
Pennsylvania, Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And she was like, well, make those kids cut so and so to cut that wood for them. They got kids, and my daddy would say, yeah, but there's only one or whatever. But my daddy would no.
And where's your daddy from?
From Manassas. He's from Manassas.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let's go back to the grave digging because that's interesting. Right. People don't realize graves or cemeteries were segregated, correct?
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about.
Because most neighborhood graves was basically in the neighborhood, and
associated with the church.
Associated with the church, right? And some of them was even on like our grave site was actually on my grandfather's land. When my grandfather passed away, he had 23 acres of land, I believe, right there in Centerville, and one of my father's brother. The one he was closest to, he was the one that lived on it, and the grave sites was right there, right on the fact he had cattle. He used to raise cattle. He was. I'm sliding away a little bit, but I got to get this in though. He was one of the first, or probably the only, that was actually raised up in Centerville, uneducated, couldn't read or write, wouldn't know his name. It was this big, a millionaire, self-made millionaire.
Wow.
He raised cattle. This man could count, but he couldn't do anything else. He had a sense. He had a business mind with no real education, kind of like me a little bit, really, a lot. But he raised cattle, pigs. Had own little business. He used to cut sod that open fields and sell them into housing projects. He was an entrepreneur. Couldn't read or write. Never went to school. My father only went to third grade. But then I get back to that. Great. Cemeteries was segregated. At least the black cemeteries was dug by hand. My father would go as far as Manassas to dig graves. Yeah, and that was the way that was done. Everything was pitched in and shared. Funerals was like when someone would pass, the neighborhood would burn if they didn't have any money. The neighborhood. That's something that I recall a lot versus today, and which I think is sad that we don't have that village instinct like we used to back then. Mm-hmm. I remember my mother, and it was done for us, but I remember my mother, somebody would, I have an adopted brother. We got him because the lady that his mom was an unmarried woman, and she was a fast lady, sweet as gold. When I say that, I don't mean to be negative at all, because she's a part of our family. My parents practically raised our family. She had like 8 kids. The one next to me, his name was Dwight, and we were very close. He drowned in our swimming hole. In the swimming hole we swim in, he drowned. And my mother and father went to her and said, look, let me take that baby, because he was an infant baby. She said, let me take that baby until you get through this thing. You got enough kids and things to do, you know. And it went from a couple of days to a couple of weeks to a couple of months until my parents started talking about it, and I hear them, you know, whispering, and like, well, what do you think? What do you think? You know, we got these kids, we got them. But anyhow, they determined, so they went. My father was a very straightforward, outspoken person, and we practically raised them, because always 3 or 4 of them was at our house overnight. So he went to Parthenia and said, look, you got a lot of kids. You got enough kids, you know, and going through what you're going through. Why don't you let us keep this boy? So I guess we kept Glenn for about 10 years before they made it official. And she said, and a couple times she would get a little drunk, and she'd come over and I want to take my baby. But like I said, my dad was straightforward, and everybody knew him for that. Mm-hmm. You know, but anyhow, we wind up with him. That's the kind of family that I was. But I remember when someone like that would pass or something like that, that we would cook for them. When we'd cook, you know, we would make sure we'd cook a meal because I remember Mom and them used to tell her, take this over to so-and-so, you know, mm-hmm. because somebody died. I mean, they do it kind of like now, but not in the same tradition. Mm-hmm. We did it because they had no food. It was, mm-hmm. Now we do it just for kindness, and you know, you sit back and weep and cry, whatever you want to do, and we'll do this. But back then, it was because they had nothing. Their husband died. It was, you know, struggling as it was, and the husband died. And so we took food because they needed food. But I remember, and like I said, we didn't have a whole lot. We was probably like I say, in our